Okay, so this is the last step of this application. Now that we built the application, that we confirm it is working, that any submission are being saved properly in our Microsoft List database tables, we now need to create and build the automation that will notify by email the relevant storekeepers in each of the warehouse location. So to do that and to complete this process, we need to go in Power Automate. So in Power Automate, which is the screen you can see now, we're basically going to start with creating a new flow, and we're going to start with automated cloud flow. So let's call it stock request notification. And then the first step to trigger that automation is the SharePoint list record, which will come from the request table. So we will select when an item is created on SharePoint, and we can start now the automation. So by default, it's requesting to connect to your Microsoft List environment. So here I need, as usual, to go on my list, any of them, to take the address bar here before the list, to go back here, to enter a custom value, to paste it, and then it should normally, so this from time to time happens, it's not refreshing correctly, so we need to go back again and reopen. This is very common in Power Automate when the environment is not loading correctly. So let's start again, automated cloud flow, stock request notification. When an item is created, create, invalid parameter, we'll do it again, custom value, paste, and now normally it should start loading. Here it goes. So now that it loads, I can select my request table and go to the next step. So the idea of this is to ensure that whenever a warehouse location is different, it sends the email to a different email account. To do that, we need to create a variable that we will call set email or equivalent, so that we are sure that we can, have a switch automatically done between the different locations whenever a warehouse location is selected. So the variable, we will gonna create it here as a new step. So we're gonna select initialize variable. Initialize variable, sorry, variable. So we take this variable here, and here we're gonna call it var email, variable email, just to be clear, and it should be a string because the email is obviously a string of characters. Once we do that, the next step will be to create what we call a switch, which is basically a condition where we will set all the different email addresses based on the location, warehouse location being selected. So here we're going to search for the step called switch. Here it is. So here on the switch, we're going to basically select the dynamic value from the request table called warehouse location. So if I search for it here, and this has to be the value, very important, because we're talking about the text value coming from the column warehouse location in the request list table. So I'm selecting that warehouse location value. Now we can now set all the cases, so the different scenarios for the different warehouse location. So we just need to click here on add case, and we're going to rename it. So the first case will be the case London, for instance. Oh, sorry, it could be any name, huh? So I mean any type. So here, the case London, we will need to select and put equal London. So exactly the exact text from the column. So with no space and with no trailing space or nothing that is different. So to be on the safe side, you can always go back to your list for instance, to the warehouse location list, and you need to make sure that the text is exactly as it is here. So if it's a capital P, capital L, capital R, and so on, this has to be exactly the same in the flow. If not, it will be recognized as something different and the flow will not operate and function correctly. So the London case, this is the one. So what do we do? In the London case, we're going to now set the variable, which is the var email, and we will actually put the exact email address that's where the email should be sent to. So I'm going to create here a plus step, and I'm going to select set variable. So here it is. So you can eventually add it as a favorite if it's a function that you will use very often. So I'm selecting it here. So here I'm going to select automatically the variable that we initialized called var email. And now we're going to have to put the exact email address. So for the test, I'm going to put my email address, which is the one from my environment, and my tenant, which is the one. And this will basically ensure that if the selection is London, the email will be sent to this account. Now we add the new case, which will be the case 2, which will be the case Paris, for instance. And we're going to do the same. So here it should be exactly the text Paris. And we're going to add the set variable, which I already put here as a favorite. And this one has to be var email with the same email address, because I only have one, so we can't test with different email address, but I can confirm by testing this in different environments that this will work if you put a different email address. It could also be an external email address, by the way, because here in my tenant, my account is coming from this innovation logistics on Microsoft.com, and this can send automatically emails to any outside email addresses if you want to, but normally within an organization, you will be required to use work-related email account. So let's put the next case now, which will be the case ROM. So let me rename it here as ROM. So we're going to again put the text exactly of ROM and add a set variable. So boom, here it is. And we're going to put again the var email with my email account. Now let's do the next case, which will be Washington or Nairobi, whatever you want to put, doesn't matter the order. Washington. So equal Washington. And again, we're going to put the set variable to be the var email and my email account. Next will be the Nairobi case, and then the last one will be Erbil, which is the one missing. So let's put Nairobi equal Nairobi. And we can then put the set variable as usual. So it's a full replication. And to finish, so what you can do as well when you have repetitive tasks like this one, now I'm doing it manually, but you can also copy and paste a step within the automation. So for instance, here, of course, I'm going to finish because this is a different version. I can go here, click and say copy action. And then I can go here on the plus, right click and say paste an action, paste an action. So here it will basically, replicate directly this. So you can save time in the process, as I did. And we can rename here 5 just to be on the safe side. So these are the different set variables. So now we are complete. So now what do we need to do? So once we have the right email selection based on the selected dropdown for the warehouse location, we need to start collecting that email address to be able to send it through an email. So here we need to add a compose action, which I will put here. And in the compose action, the input should be the var email variable. So it's automatically linked. So basically here we initialize the variable called var email, which is a string. We then do a switch with the different scenarios. If London is selected, then I send to one email. If Paris, to another email. And here the compose will basically collect one of these output from the set variables to make sure that it's the one that will be put as a recipient to the email address when we go to the send an email action. But before we can do that, we need to start to get the items. So we need to select all the fields that we need from our request table. So I need to go here and say, get items from SharePoint. So SharePoint get items, okay? So once again, I need to take here my address to put here. I'm going to enter the custom value again, and then select the request table. Here it is. Now that I've done, sorry, the requested item, my mistake, because we need to select the items based on the submitted request. So here the collection should be from the requested items, okay? Now here we need to collect the individual ID to match with the request ID. So to do this, we need to make sure that we actually pick the right ID from the request. So here we have to add a filter query. So in the advanced parameters, you have here a filter query, which we will now visualize. And you need to paste here or type request ID equal with a space. And then we're going to collect here the ID from the item created. So when an item is created, let's pick the ID number. Now that we have finished this step, we just need to create the content of the email, so the body of the email, which is best to collect as a HTML format or as a HTML table. So we're going to add a new step called create HTML table. So if you search for it, you should find it in the operations. So you go further down, and here that operation, you have create HTML table. So in the from array, we need to select the content of the get items, the step just below. So we are basically picking up the list of items from stock and the quantity that have been submitted, and this will be collected and put into a nice table so we can put it in the body of the email sent to the storekeeper. So we take here the body or the values coming out from the get item step. Okay, now we need to create the mapping of what will be put as the content of the body and the HTML table. So to do that, we go here on what columns do we want to pick. We select column and it will now come. So here by default, it comes on automatic. We need to do that manually, and we will create the customs columns. So the first one will be the item description. So it's basically the name of the stock item. So we can call it here item description. The value has to be the item value. So if you type item, sorry, you have here item ID and item value, which is the value of the item name within your request items table. The next one will be the quantity, because that's what we need. And here we're going to basically pick directly the quantity that has been saved in our table. Boom. And now we are ready to send the email. So here we're going to, the last step of that automation, which is send an email. And if you remember in a previous video, I was explaining that you have different versions, but the one we need is the Outlook one, which is part of your Office 365 enrollment. So it should be the send an email version 2. Once you have selected it, this is where we're going to say, so you need to connect here to your account or so that it's linked. So it's asking me to reconfirm the connection to my tenant. Once that is done, so here now we need to say to who are we going to send the email. So remember, we have created a variable called var email. So that's the one we need to add. And for this, we need to go into the use dynamic content and then select the var email, which is the variable that we created. Now in the subjects, you can put new whatever you want, but by default, I'll say new stock request, so the person will know and understand, the storekeeper, sorry, that somebody has made a request, just to make sure that it works well, because I'm testing now the app with only one email account, and we need to make sure that from a different request for a different warehouse location, it's the right email being sent. So for that, I'm going to put into the subject the warehouse location as well, just to be on the safe side. So I'm going to put here new stock request. Then we're going to select warehouse location value from when an item is created. And then I'm going to put here also the ID number, which I want to be put so the storekeeper can relate it to either the Microsoft list table if he has access to it, or further on to the Power BI dashboard where he can see, all the requests made as well historically, and so he can still revert back to an old request by tracking through the ID number. And here I'm taking the dynamic content as well and the ID from the when an item is created. So you can see by default, you can make a mistake. ID exists in both when an item is created, but also the get item. So here we want the ID number from the request table and not from the requested item table. Very important. So this is the right ID. Now in the body of the email, we can say the detail of what has been requested. So we can put again the request ID, and then we're going to select again the dynamic value ID from the when an item is created. Then we can say what is the request date. So this one, if you remember, is captured into one of our Microsoft list as well. So here, if you type request date, you should have it here. Play request date when an item is created, it's here. Then the requester, so who is the requester, so that the storekeepers know who made the request. And here it should be the requester value. So important, remember not the ID because that's going to be a number, but the value, which is the text coming from the column in our table. So when an item is created, the requester value, then we can also remind the storekeeper what is the warehouse location where the items are requested from. So here we can add also warehouse location, and we put the value, not the ID. And then we're now going to put the list of items coming from the create HTML table step that we did just below. So items requested as a text, and underneath we can now take the output of the create HTML table. So that means whatever here we've said item description with the name and quantity will be automatically pasted here and included into the body of the email. So to make it nice and neat, we can also, just put bold here on all these different text. So it's nice in the email being sent. And then once we do that, we can save the automation and start to test to see if it works well. So I'm completed here with the bold, perfect. So all I need to do is save. Normally there shouldn't be any error message unless we made a mistake and something is inconsistent in Power Automation. So I'm waiting for the saving process to be completed. Here it is. So the flow is ready to go and they asked to test it. So to test it, we're going to submit a live test. So I'm going back here into the flow. As you can see, this is my flow. There is no historical run. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go to the Power App application where we have our stock request application. I'm going to play it. So let me refresh because it's been an update. Good. So now let's do a test. So let's say Stephen holds from the warehouse location Erbil. We're going to ask to release 3 protection kits and 2 baby boxes, and I'm submitting. So this is successfully submitted. I'm not going to go back to the automation, and we're going to have a look at, sorry, this is one of the issues I face regularly with, that's it. So here now, We are going to wait and refresh until we see the automation being triggered. So as I explained in another video, this can take some time based on how busy the server is, and how many other users are operating. So that's it. The automation is triggered, it's running, and it succeeded. So we have no errors. So now, to be on the safe side, let's go into my email, and I should see an email coming. Here it is. So actually, there's two emails coming. I'm not sure why. I need to check, but at least the email is working. So you can see request ID 17, request date today, Stephen Halls air bill, item requested. So the description protection kit, quantity 3, baby boxes, quantity 2. So this is working well. Yeah, I need to check why this duplicated. I don't believe there's anything in the automation why the email should be sent twice. Let me reopen again. No, everything was created properly. This air bill. So what we can do also is submit another request with another warehouse location. Now you can see that in the description or the subject of the email, it's the correct location, warehouse location. Now, if I submit another request with another warehouse location and another requester, it should also show the right warehouse location. Here in Nairobi, I only have timber. I'm going to put 10 of them. And now I'm going to submit. And again, let's wait to see what's happening. So we need to wait to see when that automation will be triggered. And then we can check in my inbox if the relevant email has been properly received with the right warehouse location. Refreshing until it comes. Here it is, 1 second ago. Perfect. So now I have an email. And again, it's coming duplicated. So here, Nairobi, this is correct. The ID is the next one. Requester, warehouse Nairobi, item requested, description and quantity, everything is correct. So you see now the automation is working. The storekeeper will be notified by email. All he needs is to act on the request, prepare them, reach out to the requester separately, either on Teams, by phone, or through an email. And he can further explain that the items are ready for being picked up or for collection. So this is a fully functional logistics request application that we have set up with a proper flow and a notification system